and welcome to Coping with Donald. I'm Phil. Today is the holiday, President's Day, February 17th, 2025. I'm surprised I didn't get anything in the mail about a Kohl's sale, Kohls, or anything like that. Maybe I'll look it up online after this. But today I want to talk about, in general, about layoffs and what I did I didn't really get laid off, but what I did when I found myself jobless for a prolonged period. When I was in my 20s, I was a cost accountant at a private manufacturer, and I always said that I was the worst cost accountant in history. One reason because I hated it, and the second reason because, most importantly, most people were going to computers and digital cost accounting, and I just preferred working with a pencil and calculator, which was going the way of the dinosaur, which I was and am. So, I left that job when I was 31. I bottomed out at 33. It was bad. I had a small daughter and a wife and a stepson, and we moved to Florida, and I had hoped that things would turn around in Florida. I decided to apply and pursue a post office career. Why the post office? Because I felt that the post office was the kind of place, and it was, and it probably still is, where you don't get fired for no reason. You don't get fired for no cause. You don't get fired because somebody takes over and doesn't like bald people or something like that, which happens in the real world. So if you don't have a reason to fire someone and that person just keeps putting their nose to the grindstone, yeah, I should have been stoned, that means that they will be kept employed. I wound up getting a position in Florida, and thank God it wasn't New Jersey. That was some godly intervention there, because it would have been so cold in the winter. My hands would have frozen, cracked, bled. I don't think I would have been able to keep the job. But in Florida, I became a rural carrier associate, and I was that way for 9 years. And talk about putting your nose to the grindstone. I begged for work for 9 years. Begged. I was not considered a full-time, I wasn't a full-time employee. I was not considered career employee. I had to wait for an opening. That doesn't take too long now, because the generation that we have now doesn't want to work for the post office, and to be honest, I can see why. It's not the job it used to be. I always contend that postal workers and postal workers and teachers slipped mightily in our economic structure. Nurses and police and firemen are doing better compared to postal workers and teachers. They've lost. The general public does not desire to pay them for their services. I mean, you can, in Florida, what you would, for a part-time job with the Postal Service, which is on call, and you have to be at their beck and call all week, you might get paid an extra $5 an hour more than if you went to Aldi's. That's it. And you're getting less hours. And there's no benefits. When you're there are some health benefits. But when I was an RCA, there were no health benefits, okay? So why did I do that? Like I said, I wanted something that was more permanent, and I wanted to feel, as a rural carrier, some sort of control over my environment. And that was A complete miscalculation. Because even though a rural carrier gets paid a certain amount per day, you have to show up when they tell you to. You have to shut up if you're talking in the office. You have to never stop working when you're in the office. I'm on my own time working at the post office. You're going to pay me 7.5 hours a day, 8.5 hours a day. If I take longer, does it really bother you? Well, it did really bother them. So my only feeling of self-management was when I went out on the route. And I wound up being able to satisfy my need to have some sort of impact on the world that way. For example, making sure people's packages were brought up to the door when other carriers weren't doing things like that. So I was protected from layoffs. I wound up being a career employee for the post office for 24 years before retiring at age 66 and a half. 33 years total with the post office. To show you what kind of a nightmare it was for me, I never had any belief in myself that I could keep doing it, even though I rarely called out sick. In fact, I worked many more days while sick or in pain from some sort of irritation or injury that I had, because I didn't want to get on anybody's bad side. I wound up leaving the Postal Service and forfeiting back 5 full months of sick time. I got nothing for that. Well, I did get a little credit to my retirement, but basically I didn't get any compensation for that. All right, that's how afraid I was the whole time. And I'm still afraid. I have nightmares every night about the post office. In last night's dream, I got fired, and I was walking down the street telling people, I just got fired after 33 years. What am I going to do? You know, I guess it's time to actually say, hey, you did 33 years at the post office, even though they only count 24. Maybe you should be proud of that. Maybe you should just give yourself a break. Remember, you did a good job. I still have customers coming up to me saying, hey, we miss you. This new person, they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. When I went to the Postal Service, I needed health care for my daughter, and I knew how many jobs weren't so keen on that. And of course, when you lose your job, you lose the health care, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about the 1990s, okay? There was no Obamacare, for those of you who are wondering. And I wound up, I guess I probably, since my daughter went to school till she was about 24, I think I wound up having her covered for health care for about 10 to 15 years, somewhere in there, after I became career. God helped me. It seemed like I always use the example of the Mississippi River, and you're on one side and you're like, how am I ever going to cross this river? Because at the other end of the river was retirement, self-content, self-satisfaction, pride, things like that. And believe me, if you're going to work for the post office, you have to leave your self-esteem at home. You're not allowed to have self-esteem at the post office. In addition, if you're going to work for the post office, you have to become, if you're not already, obsessive compulsive. And I was simultaneously going to psychiatrists to be less obsessive compulsive while I was being forced to be obsessive compulsive by the post office. It was quite the push and pull. God got me through. I'd be in the river on a stone, how am I going to get across the rest of this river? And then another stone would pop up and I would leap to it. Maybe it would be the person who was harassing me from management transferred to another office. Maybe it would be $1 raise, which, believe me, the raises were terrible. They really dried up between 2000 and 2015 because Americans were getting small raises, so we were getting small raises. Very often our raise would be 1% a year. And then I'd be reading in the newspaper about firefighters and cops getting 5% a year. But anyway, that's that. But I would hop on the one stone, hop on the next stone. And then it got to the point where, even though I was emotionally wiped out, physically injured, even though I'm thankfully better shape than most of my postal brothers and sisters who went that long. But maybe I was having muscle pain or had twisted an ankle or something. I just kept on keeping on. And then once I started to get into my 50s, I was like, well, nobody else is going to hire me. I have to keep on keeping on. And then when I got to the point where I could retire early at 60 or even just retire at 62, I said, let me try to beef things up a little bit, my Social Security and the pension. The pension's a small one. They replaced the old pension system years ago. Because I kept looking for a reason to stay. I kept looking for a goal to reach. And I think that's what's hurting in retirement too. I don't have that goal. Now, again, the overall thing was I realized I didn't trust private industry due to my own experience and due to what happened to my late father and things like that. I didn't trust private industry. I didn't like accounting. I didn't like sitting in the office all day. I wanted something where I could feel like I was a boss, even though I wasn't, or feel like it was my own company, even though it wasn't. And that's what I accomplished. And anybody who's being laid off now, and you see a lot of these on Facebook, try not to blame yourself. Try to think of your strong points. Remember what you did with a company. Even when I was a cost accountant, I also had some purchasing duties. Not as in quality control, but as in numbers. I needed to keep a warehouse stocked with a product that we would purchase, and then we would ship it out to individual customers. And it had a lot to do with having limited warehouse space. It had a lot to do with coordinating with the company we were purchasing from to get the limited amount that we could get on a truck. We had a certain amount of pallets that we could get on a truck, which they had certain production lines that would run different kinds of products. So I had to make sure that I wasn't asking them to run a lot of two different products that were on the same line, and then I wouldn't get those products. I would only get one or the other. I was proud of that. That part I liked. And then, of course, later on, they took that away from me, probably because I liked it, and gave it to somebody else. And that's when I said, nah, this company's not for me. So I took a big chance. I suffered for years for it. In fact, I suffered over a decade. 3 years of underemployment, 2 to 3 years of that, at horrible jobs for minimum wage. And then the 9 years as a rural carrier associate. Try to find something that you could see yourself liking, that you can see yourself having pride in. If you want to follow a dream, try it. I think that trying for something, I never had a dream, so my dream was just to simply put food on the table and to get to a point one day where I didn't have to worry about money when I was retired, except apparently when I'm sleeping. I hope this helped in some way, okay? And I tried to find a job that I could bear, even through what happens to be boring times, which is going to come up at any job. I hope this helped you a little bit to at least give yourself credit for learning at the job you were at, to look forward to applying those skills somewhere else. Most of the people that I see on these videos are very young. They're not over the hill. They are not going to be discriminated against due to age. Please be positive and please get the job that you deserve. Good luck.